Renee Rothschild, tape number 3.
Mrs. Rothschild, so now it's 1942 and you and your fiancé are in France. What did you know about what was happening outside of France? Were stories getting to you, or did you know what was happening in other parts of Europe with regards to the Jews?
The free zone where we were in Lipo had newspapers and communication with Switzerland. In other words, I got letters from John, and I knew where he was, and we knew what was going on in the world. Not too many people were lucky enough to go to Switzerland, because when I was in Rothschild, I knew that there were young people who had tried to cross into Switzerland, were rejected and had to come back to camp. Pardon me, that was not Rothschild, it was Gurs. And all those people were deported later on. But in Rothschild, we were very restricted, and the food was terrible. But that was not the essential part. Some people were released who had relatives and could prove that they were not a burden to the government. I, of course, tried to get out too, and John was able to get me out. We had problems getting the documents to go to Switzerland, and finally what we had to do, we took the train from Lepo after having unsuccessfully tried in Gere to get our documents, our paper, for me the exit, and for John the prolongation of his visa. We simply had to leave because after the American troops came to North Africa, Germany covered the whole of France, and the borders were all closed. John would have been able to go back because he had a Swiss passport, but he didn't want to leave without me, and I was afraid, for his well-being. So we went to Lyon, where I had an aunt and an uncle, a sister of my father, and the moment we arrived in Lyon, the German troops arrived too, and the border crossings were all closed. And between Annemasse and the two little towns at the border from Switzerland to France, the Germans had already occupied. We tried, John went in Annemasse, he went to the Swiss representative, and he told him that he should go back because he was in danger also, and then gave him the address of a lady in a store, in a clothing store, and that lady got us in touch with people who helped refugees to get across the Swiss border. John will give you the story because he has the whole story how we got there. We did make it finally into Switzerland. We were married December 5th, 1942, and we came to the United States in 1951.
Between 1942 and 1951, what kind of life did you build in Switzerland following your marriage?
Well, John was in the army, and I was in Fribourg, Fribourg. That was not Freiburg, that was Fribourg in Switzerland. And our daughter was born in 1944. Sylvia was born. So I was home with her. I took some courses and some porcelain painting and I don't know what else to keep busy. And also I worked for the Red Cross in Switzerland especially prisoner of war, American prisoner of wars who had no contact with their families. I transferred mail to two parties. John was working as an engineer at Georg Fischer, which is similar to GM but not as big. And we didn't have any news from our families. We didn't know where they were. I tried through the Red Cross to find news, from my thing. My sister in Köln had John's address in Switzerland, and she was able to write to him until she was deported.
What did happen to your mother and father and sister, and how did you find out about it?
Incidentally, my mother and father were in Gurs, and John was able to visit them there and ask for permission to marry me. And my dad, who had at that time a concession for food that he bought from the Spaniards and distributed, he sold it because he had to pay for it too, to the people in the camp. They always kept 5% of their receipts for people who didn't have any money, who couldn't buy anything, so they helped them out too. So my dad and my mother met John in Gurs, and my dad came with a bottle of wine. I don't know where he got it, but to celebrate his visit. In the meantime, my sister was in Köln, like I mentioned before, and she was deported on the 30th of September 42. She was deported from Köln, and she wrote us, "Don't worry about me, I'm young." She was not yet 20 years old. "I will make it, and I just want to, I wish you happiness in your marriage." And then she was deported from Theresienstadt to Auschwitz in January 30th, 1943. So she actually was young and was able to survive for a while. But in Theresienstadt, she met a friend of my dad's who was also in Theresienstadt. And that man must have been in the 50s or 60s. And he came back after 37 months. He came back to Köln. So in other words, there were some people who survived. My sister did not. She said she will write to us if she has any opportunity, but not to worry about her. And she said, "I keep courage and hope that God will help."
How did you know that she was deported to Theresienstadt and then to Auschwitz? How did you find that out?
I was in touch with the World Congress in the Red Cross, and they confirmed the dates.
What about your parents, your mother and father?
My parents, my mother in October 42 was deported from Germany to Gurs, and they had 30,000 people or something like that. And that was after 3.5 years that my parents saw each other for the first time.
How did your father wind up coming to Gurs?
My dad was free. My dad was in Marseille with his brother, Fred. But when he heard that my mother was in Gurs, he went back to Gurs. And he tried to get her out too, and I tried to get them out. A week before they were deported, I got permission to have them come to work in an agricultural place. But the papers took too long, and when I finally got the papers, they were gone.
And where were they taken, and how did you
They were
know
taken
that?
to Drancy, and from Drancy to Auschwitz. How I know? Through the Red Cross. And, the Jewish organizations had lists of the people who were deported. The Germans were very organized and had dates of the people who were deported.
So let's go back to following your marriage in 1942. tell me more about those years in Switzerland. Were those good years? Were they safe years? What did you know about what was happening outside and the rest of the war?
We were very fortunate that we came to Switzerland and were able to live free. John worked, like I said, as an engineer, and I was taking care of our daughter Sylvie. I was not well. After her birth, I was 3 months sick. I had blood clots in my legs, and I had nobody to help us. So Sylvie was in a nursery, and I was at home alone. John was in the military service. So it was, at the beginning, was difficult. But the Jewish community were very nice to us, and they helped with furniture and things. We didn't have any money. Then I couldn't work. Physically, I wasn't well, and of course, I had a baby, but we were satisfied. In other words, we had a small apartment, and John worked. We were in Switzerland until 1951.
What did you know during those first few years? What did you know of the war outside Switzerland? And do you remember anything about what happened in 1945? What did you know?
Switzerland was a free country, and we had communication with all the countries. Our main effort was to try to save our families. And I was in contact with the Swiss organizations, with the Red Cross, with the International Red Cross, with the Jewish organizations, and we did not know anything definite. We had contacted one of the Swiss, what do you call them, in the government, one of the members of the government, Dr. Musi, who had a deal with Germany going to send them trucks in exchange for refugees who were saved. It didn't work. We didn't get them out. We tried for John's family and for my family. Couldn't get them out.
Why did you and John and with Sylvie decide to come to the United States in 1951?
John had an offer while he was in Switzerland to go to Israel to head a foundry. But John had an uncle here in America and had given the papers, affidavits, for John. He had given the affidavits for his mother and brother and sister also earlier, but his mother didn't want to leave the family and they didn't come. She was on the German quota and the children were on the Swiss quota. So the Swiss were ready much earlier because there were less people from Switzerland coming here. But the mother was on a German quota. That took much longer. And the same with me. When we came here, I was again on the German quota, even though I was a Swiss citizen. But Sylvia and John had the quota much faster. And in 51, Uncle Rudi and my relatives, I had cousins here, together gave the affidavits for us, and we came here.
When you talk about the quotas, can you explain what you mean by that?
These are numbers. You get a number when you apply to leave your country and to come to the United States. So the United States Consulate gives you a number, and when that number is called and you have fulfilled all the requirements, that you wouldn't be at the charge of the government and that you would be able to live in the country, and you don't have a record of any that you haven't done anything wrong, then you will get permission to come to the United States. And we came in 51 on the Ile-de-France, and we were first in New York. We were there for about 3 months while John was looking for a job. We had an apartment, and my cousins lived in New York there. And then when John had a job here in Detroit, we moved here.
And where did your husband get a job here in Detroit?
At first, it was a Swiss, the son of a Swiss manufacturer of watches who had a plant here, and John worked for him. Now, his problem was that we were not American citizens at that time, and most of the work was done for the government. So he could work, but not in a restricted area. And then afterwards, he visited General Motors. No, Ford. Ford offered him a job. They had a new plant in Cleveland, and we had to wait 3 months until this plant was finished, and we didn't have the money to wait 3 months. So he got a job at General Motors, and we moved to Pontiac. And the Jewish community in Pontiac was very nice. There was a family, Mr. and Mrs. Meyer Simon. They didn't have any children. They treated us like we were their children. For the holidays, we were at their place, and it was very helpful because the Jewish community was always very good to us. First thing we always contacted, we looked in the phone book if there was a synagogue. First thing we went. And when we went to the synagogue in Pontiac, the rabbi said, I just came a week ago, but go to Mr. and Mrs. Simon, they will help. And it was true, they did help.
And what did you do while your husband settled in at General Motors? What did you do?
First of all, we had another baby. In 1953, we had a son, Armand. And I was home. I stayed at home for 20 years. I was a stay-home mother. I took courses at Oakland University at that time, Michigan State, Oakland, and at Wayne State University. And I started teaching. First, I did teach elementary school French at Webster Elementary School in Pontiac and two schools in Birmingham. And then when I had enough credits, I transferred to Wayne and worked on my master's degree. And I taught at the same time. And I must say I was very grateful to my husband and my family that they allowed me to go back to school. It was difficult to have a household and take care of the family and go to classes and teach, but it worked out very well. In 1966, our daughter Sylvia graduated from University of Michigan, and I graduated from Wayne State University, both with master's degrees.
And what did you go on and teach and where?
At first I taught at Oakland University. At that time it was Michigan State, Oakland. First and second year French. And we organized the whole department because they didn't have any French at that time. We had to prepare all the lessons and all the books and so. And after 2 years, I did not have yet my master's degree. After 2 years, when I had my degree, I went to Oakland Community College at Farmington Hills, and I taught there for 27 years. And for 15 years, I was chairperson for foreign languages.
And you were teaching what?
Excuse me?
And you were teaching what subject?
French.
And what happened, what went on with your children? You mentioned that Sylvie got a master's from University of Michigan. What did Armand do?
Sylvia, after graduation from University of Michigan, she got a job as a French teacher at Evanston in Illinois. And Armand went also to university. No, Armand was at Webster School for 4 years, and then he was at Kleinbrook for 8 years. Then when he graduated, went to University of Michigan, and he graduated from there. And then he continued his studies in medical school at in Milwaukee, University of Wisconsin, and he is now living in Louisville, Kentucky. Sylvia just retired from teaching after 30 years. She lives in Wilmette, Illinois, yes. And they have 2 sons, Martin, who just got married, and David, who will get married in this year, in Labor Day. They're both lawyers.
And what about Armand? Did he marry, and did he...
Armand is also married. He is a cardiologist, and his wife is also a physician. She is in internal medicine, and she taught at the University of Louisville, but now is assistant director of Veterans Administration in Louisville. They have also 2 sons. They have Daniel, who is 15, and Nathan, who is 12. He will have his bar mitzvah in January. Daniel had it 2 years ago.
Looking back, what is it that you think how did this experience change you? You were going back and forth, and you had freedom, and then you lost freedom. How do you think it helped define who you are now and what your priorities are?
My most important lesson is that you have to rely on yourself at any time of your life. If you hope that other people will help you, you might be disappointed. In our case, sometimes we had help, and we were very grateful for it, but basically it is your own decision what you're doing in life, and you have to take the responsibility for that, good or bad. But both John and I were very fortunate in having so far accomplished our goals, and my endeavor was in contact with human beings to set an example the best I can, to be honest, decent, and respectful to other people, and to instill in other people willingness to do their best. It works. I have a great confidence in our young generation, our young people, and I hope that the world will be better for it.
Are there any other thoughts that you would like to leave?
First of all, I want to thank you for doing the interview for us. I also want to thank the Spielberg organization for doing a tremendous job, hopefully educating other people. I think education is a basis for a better world for people here in America and in other countries, because if you have an education, you have more self-confidence, and you can help yourself to have a better life. We are grateful for our family, our children and grandchildren, and we appreciate very much what we have, and we thank God every day for a good life. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Rothschild. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, and Mrs. Rothschild, who is this?
That's my mother and myself. We were at a holiday in the German Alps. We had relatives in Kempten, in Allgäu, and that was taken there.
Do you know
I was about 1.5 or 2 years old.
So what year was it?
I must have been 20 or 21 maybe.
And who is this?
This is, in the middle is my sister Martel. She must have been about 3 or 4 years old. On the right is my cousin Margot, who also was deported but was lucky enough to come back. And I'm to the left.
And about what year was this?
Margaret must have been about 5.5, and I must have been 8 or so, 8 or 9.
So this would have been approximately what year?
1928 probably.
And do you recall what city this was taken
That
in?
is in Rheinbischofsheim at my aunt's house. My cousin took the picture, my cousin Alfred.
And who is this?
These are my parents, Heinrich and Elsa Bodenheimer, and that picture was taken on Pesach, or Passover, or Easter, 1938.
And where?
In Kehl, Rheinstraße 7.
And what is this?
This is a back of my certificate from business school. And what is interesting on that is that Deutschland muss leben, auch wenn wir sterben müssen. Which means you pay a high price for life. And our family did pay a high price.
And what is this?
This is my mother and sister
And
in
what,
1939. She sent my father and me a picture. We haven't seen them 2 years.
do you know where it was taken?
I have no idea. In Kehl, probably. That's where I lived at the time.
And what is this we're seeing?
These are documents, my release from GURS, and the bottom is a receipt that the belongings I had left when I was interned were returned to me by the police in Lepo.
And what year was this?
That was 1940.
And who is this?
This was taken in Switzerland. It's an enlargement of a passport picture. It was taken in 1950, so I was 30 years old.
And where was it taken?
In Schaffhausen, in Switzerland.
Hey, and what is this?
That's a picture of my husband. It must have been in the 1940s.
And what is his name?
John Rothschild.
And who is this?
This is my husband and I. It was probably on our 15th wedding anniversary. And that was in 1957.
And where was it taken?
That was taken in Pontiac, Michigan.
And who is this starting from left, the back left?
This is our 50th wedding anniversary. And from the left to the right is Nathan, our grandson, Mary Lee, our daughter-in-law, Armand, our son, Sylvia, our daughter, Michael, our son-in-law, David, our grandson, and Martin, our grandson. And seated next to me is Daniel, our grandson, and my husband is on the other side.
And what year was this?
When was our 50th? 1992.
And where was this taken?
That was taken at Sylvia's house in Chicago, Illinois.
And what is this a photo of?
This picture was taken at our grandson's wedding last year in July 2000. And we have Armand from the left, Armand, Mary Lee, Michael, Sylvia, what's her name? Melissa, Martin, David, Aaron, his fiancée, Danielle, Nathan, and John and I.